Man, you got a radio voice. Listen to you.
Well, that's
Wow.
actually that's my that's one of my gigs. That's what I do. I do voiceovers for commercials and cartoons and that kind of thing. So that's why during the pandemic I thought I would just I don't know, do shit at home.
It's fun, right? Gives you
I know.
something to focus on and be creative and
And also over the holiday, my gift to myself was a brand new SM7B. So that's why, yeah, I know, I know, I know.
that's the dream.
It's well, and the funny thing is, it's just to rub it in even more. Was I actually had some gift card money in the American Amazon store from a while ago from another business I had,
Mhm.
and so I had like $800 to spend at the Amazon store that I had totally forgotten about. And so I went and I picked up the SM7B for free. And then
No.
at the same time, I also got this mixer to go with it. So there's a mixer that I can sort of like I can bleep out if I want to say. "Mm."
Is that's not the Rode mixer, is it? Which mixer is that? Oh, I lost your voice. Yeah.
Oh wait, oh there we go. Hello.
I hear you.
Oh
Got
sorry,
it.
I thought I was hitting the bleep button. I was actually hearing Leo, dude.
Oh, look. Well, at the same time your cat jumped up, mine's on her way up too.
Well, they can meet and it can be a meeting of worlds. There we go. This has happens quite frequently when I do a record. Leo decides to get involved. This is the Go XLR Mini.
Go XLR Mini. Okay.
Yeah, which is actually I really like it. There's the bigger one, the Go XLR, which a lot of Twitch people use and a lot of streamers use, but it has more stuff than I will ever need in a million years. So this was perfectly fine for me, dude.
This
Come on.
makes me laugh. I love
He's
that.
just, you know what? He's showing off right now. He's just like, oh, I'm so beautiful, but don't notice me.
It's because I have my own glass of water and because she's too good for her own water. And that's why she's here. She wants to
So
knock it
now,
over.
are you in Edmonton? Is that where you are?
I am in Edmonton. Yes.
I I did not know that it was funny when you and I started chatting on Reddit. I
Mhm.
didn't know that it was a Canadian podcast. So when I was pitching, saying, "Hey, we can do a bunch of Canadian artists," I'm like, "Oh, they're not going to want to do Canadian artists. It's just like this, weird schmucky Canadian guy." I didn't even know that you were a Canadian podcast. So that's great.
Yeah, no, I was like, I was worried that I was putting out the impression that I was specifically looking for Canadian artists. And I'm like, no, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, no, it's
It's
good.
completely international. But I have found that a lot of the people we have gotten to be on the show so far are Canadian artists.
Well, that's great. And I mean, hey, you got Lana and you got a couple other people. So that's, I mean, if you can get those people, why not? Right. I mean, that's going to increase your hit rates and get your numbers up. And you want to say hi to
Yeah.
Naomi? Say hi. Say hi to Naomi.
What's
There's little
your
kid.
name?
That's Leo.
Leo.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. She's just sitting on the other side of the camera here. She's just being a little shy.
Oh, I like your background.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
My max headroom.
Yeah. Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Is it actually lit up or is that an optical illusion?
It's a green screen.
Oh, it's a green screen.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. There we go. There we go.
Yeah, I've
Got it.
been
Got it.
having
Got it.
fun with all that stuff. I was going to ask for your permission that I always ask before we start, if we do use any of the video, if you're okay with that for like bonus material on YouTube or our
Yeah. Yeah.
promotion
Sure.
stuff. You're okay with that?
Sure. I didn't put on my makeup, but whatever.
That's cool. No worries. I want to welcome you, Don, to Dope Nostalgia. And just to let the people know, I put out on Reddit looking for guests that would be bringing some really cool information about artists they love to the show. And that's how you and I got connected. Now, the name of your podcast is Three Interesting Things. Can
That
you
is
tell
correct.
tell everybody about your show?
So, Three Interesting Things is a weekly podcast where every week we discuss the three most interesting things on the internet this week as submitted by listeners. And so, mostly submitted by listeners. As we got started, of course, I had to cheat a little bit since we didn't have listeners at the beginning, but now that it's
Yeah.
picking up, it's getting a little bit better than that. So, yeah, so we can talk about all kinds of things. People submit things from entertainment, from history, from science, from whatever. And then myself and a different guest host every week talk about those three things in sort of interesting and fun and quirky ways. So it's the idea is that it's a little bit informational, but instead of two people just shooting their mouths off, it's also just like conversation. So yeah, a weekly show. It's kind of fun. People can try it out if they like it. Great, subscribe. If they don't, I have a feeling they can find another podcast. It's not like there's a shortage of them.
That's true. That's true. But you mix up the topics, obviously, like the subject matter. You're gonna have any politics in there, or is that
Well,
something?
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
because
yes and no. I mean, I try to steer clear too much of politics and keep it relatively factual. Although that being said, this week's episode, the three topics were: the first one was about presidential dogs and the only dog in history that has a statue, a presidential dog. The second one was about the fact that Orson Welles met Hitler, and the third one was: do we need an international language in space? But other topics have been, how many American states lie north of Canada? The Superman curse, is it real? Over Christmas, we did 87 interesting things about the movie Die Hard. So it's all over the place. It's a lot of fun. And the one that's coming out next, we just recorded, has to do with COVID and ghost hauntings and how they've gone up during COVID, and a killer squirrel in Rego Park, New York. So yeah, you
these
can see
are
it's kind of all over the damn place.
these are very interesting
Yeah.
topics.
Well, I have to live up to the title, right? It can't be three boring ass things. It has to be interesting.
Exactly. No, so everybody should check that out. And well, we'll run a trailer. If you get a trailer, we'll run a trailer as well.
Oh, awesome! I'll send it to you. Thanks. And
Yeah,
hey,
I'll
listen,
exchange with
I
you.
also have to somehow sound like I know what I'm talking about on this show, so people don't think I'm a total schmuck.
One of the bands that we decided to talk about today is a band that I only know a small amount about. I tried to do a bit of research and I got some things to talk about together
All
so that
right.
but Living Color was
What's your favorite color, baby? Living
they're
color.
still active to this day.
Yeah, which you know what? The funny thing is, of the two of us, I am the bigger Living Color fan, and I didn't even know that. I was doing a
Yeah.
bit of research too, because I know my way around Living Color, because I still listen to them to this day. But when I was sort of Googling and doing a bit of searching, I'm like, oh, they just released an album 3 years ago, and I had to listen to it yesterday, actually.
Wonderful. What did you think of it?
Yeah. I mean, no,
I
it wasn't bad, but at the same time, it wasn't one where I was saying to myself, I have to listen to this multiple times. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was one of those ones where I'm like, okay, they still got the chops. Vernon can still play. Corey can still sing. The songs are interesting, but at no time was I saying to myself that I was going to listen to it again. And there's probably a very good chance that I probably will not.
Do you ever find that a lot of the bands that you really admired earlier in your life, the newer material just doesn't do it for you?
You know what's funny? Like one thing I have found, and you and I think, are of a bit of a different vintage. I think I'm a little bit older than you are, and I one of the
Only
things that
maybe a little. I'm 42.
yeah, I'm old. You're 42. You look fantastic, girl.
Thank you.
Uh,
Not it's the lighting, sure.
it's yeah, exactly. It's the lighting. Yes, I am indeed older than you. And one of the things that I have found, and maybe you can confirm this too, is that it's different now that we don't buy stuff at a store. Do you know what I mean? Like it used to be that you would go down to HMV, you would go down to Sam the Record Man, you would go down to whatever, and you would buy yourself the new, Living Color cassette or CD or whatever it was, and you would own that object and you would have it. And because of that, you knew when they were coming out, you knew what the release was, and you heard about it, even though it was, pre-internet, you knew that there was, a new blankety blank CD coming out.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you don't really get that. It's just all of a sudden it's like, oh, Ariana dropped a new album yesterday. Okay, I didn't know that was coming. And I've had this happen a number of times with artists who I really, really like, suddenly discovering that they released an album last year and I knew nothing about it. And I'll listen to it, I'll be like,
Mhm.
oh, this is great. But it's like, how did I not know that, Ray LaMontagne released another album? Like, what the hell?
Yeah, the buildup's not there as it used to be, and I think a lot of times artists do that on purpose because if the buildup were there, it would leak on them.
I guess it would, but the thing is, it's going to leak anyway, right? I mean, like now that
Yeah.
it's everything's on Spotify, and now that everything's digital, the second it comes out, it's like films too, right? I mean, like Wonder Woman came out over Christmas, and by noon on Christmas Day, it was all over the internet. It's like that's
Yeah.
the world that we live in, right?
No matter what, it's going to get pirated, but my I would say there's been so many instances where the album came out before it was supposed to.
Right,
And
right.
that's probably why they're just like, "Oh, here you go, surprise."
Yeah, exactly. Especially the bigger artists, right?
Yeah. And another thing you mentioned about, back in the day when you go and you have that, you pick up the album and you have that ownership of it. I think it also made you much more invested in the music. Even like you would know more about like the album tracks, the deep cuts,
Yeah.
because you owned it and there was more excitement around the event of getting it.
Well, also because I think the key word there, and you hit upon it, is the fact that it was an album, right? It wasn't just, like people. I forgive me if I'm going to sound really Andy Rooney here. You know what bugs me? Here's the old man. Is the fact that people don't really release an album anymore. Yes, they release albums, but at the same time, their albums are just a collection of songs, three of which have been tagged by the A&R man to be as singles, which go out, etc. And that's happened for a long time.
Yeah.
But back in the day, they people released albums and people put thought into them so that there was a side A and there was a side B, and that you put the thought into which thing was going to go where, and you actually had this object in your hands, this CD in your CD drive, and you were reading the liner notes and you were looking at the cover pictures and all the rest of it. So it was a bit more of an experience as opposed to the fact that, if like Living Color came out with a new album, I didn't know about it. I listened to it yesterday in my living room 10 seconds after I found out about its existence, and I finished listening to it, and then I went and made dinner. I mean, that's a whole different experience, right?
Hmm. And I also miss like reading through the liner notes while it was playing for the first time.
Yeah, and seeing who, hey, oh, I didn't know. Hey, Slash played guitar on this track.
Exactly. Yeah, it was definitely more of an event than what we've got going on nowadays. But I think a lot of people are obviously missing that, and that's why the surge in vinyl is also so huge to
Oh,
do
jeez.
the making of an event of getting the album again. I think has been part of that reason.
I was talking about this on Three Interesting Things a week or two ago. One of the guests was talking about vinyl, and I mentioned the fact that my daughter who is 20, she got herself a record player for Christmas, and so one of the things that she was asking for was vinyl, and said, get me a couple of albums, and I thought, sure, I'll get some albums. So she wanted Beyonce. She wanted Lemonade by Beyonce, so I got it for her. It was $50.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? 50 bucks. Now, you and I realize the absolute absurdity of that because we have purchased like
Yes.
$50 for a piece of vinyl is just because now it's an artifact, right? It's not just a piece of music. It's an artifact that you have and you put on display, and you have the cover, and it's art as well, right?
Exactly. And the thing is, a lot of these albums weren't even recorded in analog, so the sound quality isn't going to be as good. Even it's digital moving on to a piece of vinyl. It's
Right.
not the same.
Yeah.
Um,
They can remix it as much as they want, but it's going to be a different experience, right?
yeah. And the other thing, what was I going to say? Oh, I blanked out. Something, I don't know.
It's okay.
But
This is the part that you edit out to make us sound smarter.
exactly, I always edit this out. Oh yeah, okay. When you're saying $50, I remember when a CD was 25 and I thought that was really, really
Oh,
expensive.
totally.
But and that was
The
20
very
years ago.
first CD that I bought, the very first CD that I bought, I remember it was Pink Floyd. It was Pink Floyd's The Final Cut because it had actually just came out. And I
Mm,
paid 25 bucks, and I thought to myself, how do I justify paying
yeah.
$25 for an album? Because, up until then, you bought your cassettes for $7.99 or your cassettes for $8.99. Oh
Yeah.
God, I sound so old, Naomi. I sound so old.
I'm right there with you on this. The first CD I bought, I think it was Porno Graffiti by Extreme. And
Yes.
it was 25 at the time too. Yeah.
You know what's weird? I didn't have that CD, but a number of my friends had that CD, and it wasn't until like 6 months after I had first encountered it that I realized that it was called Porno Graffiti. I totally thought it was called pornography the entire time. That doesn't say anything about me at all, though. Don't extrapolate from that.
Oh man, that was a good album. But let's talk about Living Color, of course. One thing I thought was really cool because I'm like searching them and stuff, and I'm trying to look them up, and I'm always typing in COLOR because I figured I didn't realize they went with the British spelling, the
Yeah, they went.
actual
Oh,
COLOUR.
you are. That's right. They went with the British and the Canadian spelling, and I think one of there are a few reasons why we think that happened. One of the main one is that the guitarist Vernon Reed was actually born in England. He was British,
Mm-hmm.
and so he had spelt it Living Color and he was the main sort of formative force behind the band,
Yeah.
and so he had spelt it Color all that way. And then I guess the people at the label were like, "This is good because it's different and it's unique, and people will think that it's kind of how people spell." words differently on it, and it was just kind of an organically occurring thing like that.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that I was impressed.
Yeah.
We don't I find a lot of people tend to make fun of the fact that we throw U's in a lot of words, but or that we go by the British spellings, but
Damn
that
Canadians.
I'm one of those like grammar freaks and spelling freaks, so I just absolutely love it. I love the Oxford comma. Okay. There was actually a huge role, from what I understand, that Mick Jagger played in their discovery.
Yeah, I mean, so Living Color, for those who don't know, for anybody who is not, now when you and I were talking about Living Color, did you know did you immediately say, oh, at least I know the song blank, or did you
Yeah,
not know any of the song? Yeah, so what was the main song? I'm
cult
guessing it was Cult of
cult of
Personality, right?
personality. Yeah.
That's the one that everybody knows because that was their sort of the big hit. That was the huge hit from Vivid. Now the thing about Living Color is that they have released a number of albums, including one just a couple of years ago. They released one after Vivid, which was called Time's Up, which was really good. But at the end of the day, Vivid was the album, right? I mean, it's the one to talk about because it's the one that kind of changed everything. And Cult of Personality was the big song from it.
Mm.
They were a big kind of not a session band, but they were a big band, live band in New York in the 80s, like around 85, 86, 87. They were playing CBGBs.
Mhm.
And then lo and behold, nobody was going to sign them. And the main reason why nobody was signing them was because no one could really get on board with the fact that here was a bunch of black guys who played like shredding rock and roll because the industry was just so kind of there was so much striation in the industry in the sense that okay, this is what rock looks like. It's a lot of white guys with long hair in the late 80s, right?
Mhm.
Singing about this, that, and the other thing. And if you were black in the late 80s, what you were doing is you were doing rap or you were doing the beginnings of hip hop or whatever. So here you have Vernon Reed, who's the guitarist for Living Color, one of the most amazing guitarists of the last 30 years, like just an astonishing guitarist.
Yeah.
And Corey Glover, and the two of them put together this band. I shouldn't shortchange the other band members, but those are kind of the two main ones. And they were playing all these live shows, and Mick Jagger was looking for people to play on his new album that he was putting together and for his tour, his solo album that he was doing. And he had heard about Living Color because they were playing around New York at the time and he was living in New York at the time. So he actually went to CBGB's to hear them play and hired them immediately to tour with the Stones. So
Mm.
when the Stones actually toured the next year, I think it was the Steel Wheels tour, Living Color opened for them. And the weird thing was, in between then and the time that the tour happened, Vivid came out. It got huge. Cult of Personality got huge, and a lot of people, myself included, who saw them in that concert, was saying, "Why is Living Color opening for the Stones? Because Living Color is a big band now. It was like most of the time the band that's going to open for the Stones is going to be a band that you've never heard of from like Seattle and go, okay, they're fine, get them off the stage." But here was this band that had actually struck it really, really big in the meantime.
I saw there was a few I guess it just depends on the era. I think it was 1995. There's a few bigger bands that have opened for the Stones, at least in more recent years.
There were a bunch, and I can tell you a sort of a little story that a friend of mine told me. So I went to see them when they played my hometown. It was the Stones and Living Color, and I'm not going to lie to you, I was going largely for Living Color, not as much for the Stones. As much as I
Yeah.
like the Stones, I was going for Living Color. But a friend of mine actually worked backstage, and he told me that there was a big rumor going around that Living Color sounded so good and was getting such good response that some people in the Stones camp, it might not have even been the Stones themselves, actually told the engineers and the technicians to mix them kind of into mud to make them sound crappier so that the Stones sounded cleaner and crisper when they came on. And so by the time the tour was done, you actually had Living Color coming out and playing, but their mix was really, really off so that they would not sound as good as they could sound because they had had many, many years to become this really sharp live band because they had played gig after gig after gig at CBGB's. So they
Mhm.
knew what live bands were. They knew what it was to gig. And here they were playing stadiums and arenas now.
Mhm. Well, I really hope it's not the case that they would get screwed over by sound engineering in that kind of manner. But
I like, yeah, as I say, it might be apocryphal. This is a friend of mine who told
yeah,
me this, and I'm not going to, you know, vouch for his veracity, but it is a fascinating story.
I
I will
tell
say
you, nothing surprises me though.
nothing surprises me either, and I will say that when I saw them, I did find their sound to be a little bit funky. Actually, I didn't even notice it until the Stones came on, and when the Stones came on, all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is what the sound is supposed to sound like. Now I get it.
When that kind of thing happens, I usually think it's because each band has their own engineer.
That could be it too. Although, it like that's a good question actually, because sometimes it also comes down to the venue, right? It also comes down to the joint where they're playing,
Hmm.
because many of these people would be union, and the union people in the house would be running the entire thing, right?
Yeah.
So
There was a quote I found when we go back to talking about the issue of race. Um, one of the most, and it's a quote from Will Calhoun, which is a drummer.
yeah,
He says, one of the most frustrating things is the ignorance of people who will not admit or deal with the fact that Black people invented rock and roll.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think the rest of it of that wasn't exactly a quote from him, but it was from the article I read. It says, by making songs about the perils of hero worship, racism, and gentrification, Living Color forced listeners to reckon with uncomfortable truths.
It's true. And the interesting thing about them is that even though they were playing, good hard thrash and rock and roll, they did not shy away from racial topics. Like if you look at Vivid, a number of the songs on that album, Funny Vibe, is a song all having to do with race.
Hmm.
Open Letter to a Landlord has to do with race. So they didn't shy away from it. And based on the album that I was just listening to yesterday, their new one, they still are not shying away from it, and good for them. So that was the problem, is that a lot of people just didn't know what to make of them, because also when you listen to them, here you have this guy just shredding like Tom Morello, and this
Yeah.
guy singing hardcore, and it's like, damn, these guys really rock and roll. They sound like, modern day Zeppelin, but when you look at them, they look like they should be doing like a hip hop, because also um Danny Glover. I knew I was going to make that mistake. That was actually Corey Glover, who is the lead singer. There was a lot of mistaking at the time. People thought that he was the son of Danny Glover. People actually said he's the son of Danny Glover, to the point where he had to say, "I am not the son of Danny Glover." Um, Corey Glover's trademark look at the time was this kind of tight-fitting body glove wetsuit, which he wore in the video for Cult of Personality. And they were also one of those bands that was fortunate enough to come out with videos right at the peak of MTV, right? MTV
Mm.
was still in its heyday. So when Cult of Personality was picked up by MTV and ran like ad nauseum, there was, Corey Glover rocking out in his, and this band, which people were like, wow, look at this. Although it was, I will say, I think it was a bit of a double-edged sword, because I think they also did market themselves on that as well. Like it was something that stopped them from getting a recording contract for a million years. But then
Mhm.
once they got it, and once they became big, I do get the feeling that the label was like, hey, look at all these black guys who are rock and rolling, sort of using that as a point of entry for people who had not heard them yet.
I think that they inspired a lot of people who didn't think that they would be acceptable for them to do that genre. Like, for
Yeah,
instance,
totally.
Tom Morello. Tom
Yeah.
Morello. I mean, he said too, when he first heard of the song Cult of Personality, he was absolutely blown away that clearly there are other African Americans who unapologetically loved Led Zeppelin and wanted to shred.
Yeah, it's true.
So it
And
helped to
and
inspire him.
and if you listen to, well, I mean, like if you just break down Cult of Personality, because the funny thing is, like that song is the one that everybody knows. I like that song. I find there's other songs on that album that are significantly better. Middleman's really good.
Mm.
But if you listen to the riff, that opening riff, that na 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 na, that thing, apparently it was actually Corey Glover just humming that to himself in a hallway as they were sort of getting the band together. And they were he was sort of humming this little tune. And then Vernon Reed, who's the guitarist, was like, hey, I like that. And they took it and they kind of into the studio and they wrote it in a couple of hours. And lo and behold, a couple hours later, Cult of Personality was there. But that lick is now so famous. It was also, and I didn't know this, it was used in a number of Guitar Hero, the video game Guitar Hero.
Yes.
It was used in that quite heavily, and it was kind of like the boss level Guitar Hero. Like if you got really, really, really good, if you were
Yeah.
insanely good, you would go. And as I was actually looking up a couple things to talk about tonight, I stumbled upon this guy who got 100% on Cult of Personality in Guitar Hero and uploaded the video onto YouTube. And I highly recommend your listeners go watch it, if for no other reason than to say, what the hell? Because once it gets into the guitar solo in the middle of the song, it's just insane. It's just I
Expert
don't know how.
mode.
Oh, it's I don't even know how this guy did it. It's you. He must have had to do it a bazillion times, like Groundhog Day, just doing it again and again and again and again till he got it perfect.
I remember those days where Guitar Hero was like everybody's like addiction, and
Yeah.
people would play it for hours to
Well,
get
and
it
you know what's
right.
funny? If you look at that video, you look at the kind of the cartoon characters that are in the background that they've put in there, and
Yeah.
it's sort of like, oh yeah, the early 2000s, because
Yeah.
it hasn't aged terribly well. It's that's what makes you realize, because at the
Well,
time you thought to yourself, oh my god, this is so cool, this is so cutting edge, but now you look back at it and it's like, oh, I remember that that's interesting there.
it's so vintage now. It's so strange that it feels that way, especially for like it feels like it was just yesterday.
Yeah.
And I had the Rock Band game 1, 2, and 3. So I still have the drum pad and all of that. We used to play that. But I mean, like people would spend so much time playing this game. I said to myself, why don't you pick up a real guitar?
Yeah, it's true.
There was an episode of South Park that was like that. Where do you watch South Park?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Randy Marsh, the best dad ever on cartoons. He
yeah.
the kids are loving to play Rock Band or whatever it was. I think it was Guitar Hero. And he goes out and gets his real guitar and he plugs in the amp and he's like in his underwear and shirt in the living room playing it. And the kids are like, "You're so lame playing a real guitar."
You know, the other thing that I was thinking about when it comes to Living Color, and when it comes to Vivid in particular, is that so many of the albums and so many of the artists that we talk about, and then you talk about on your show, are kind of like, you know, you don't want to necessarily call them one hit wonders. Some of them were one hit wonders. Some of them sort of had their birth and death in the 80s or 90s, right? I mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
when they happened, and that's that. And Living Color is no different. I mean, like you and I as someone who is a fan of Living Color didn't even know they had a new album, right? But
Mhm.
that being said, I think sometimes what happens is that we as consumers of music assume that that can sometimes also be a reflection on the quality of the music, right?
Mm,
And that because of the fact that
right.
you know, that their careers lived and died in this short time frame, that means that the music wasn't necessarily good or it wasn't long lasting. And the thing about Vivid, and I will die on this hill, the thing about Living Color and the thing about Vivid is that if this album came out today, you would not know that it was from 1987. You would not know. It
It's
sounds so clean and so crisp, and like it's time. It is so, I hate to say it's timeless because it's cliche, but it is timeless.
it holds up.
It
More
holds
than
up
holds
really
up.
well. Did you listen to it be like in the lead up?
I have not. No. I'm on another podcast where I have to listen to some albums, so I'm kind of behind on my listening to things. So I'll be honest, I did not. But
If you want, I would say this. If you want to listen to listen to the first four tracks. Listen to Cult of Personality, I Want to Know, Middleman, and Desperate People,
okay.
and at those four tracks, you'll just be like, "Holy!" Am I allowed to swear or no?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you'd say, "Holy shit! This is really good, solid music." And
Mm,
Vernon's guitar solos are insane, and Corey's singing is the interesting thing about Corey's singing is that it's a combination of that kind of like shriek and rock and roll,
mhm,
but with a little bit of kind of funk thrown into it and soul thrown into it, like this little infusion. And also the like some of the tracks have like a bit of a jazzy feel to it. It was
mm,
all over the place. They had so many influences going into their music that they could do so much. They were really talented musicians. And so I think that's one of the reasons why the music has traveled so well. There are a lot of artists from the 80s and 90s who are forgotten for a reason, right? I mean, yes,
yeah.
they were fine, and yes, that one song we all listened to Lou Bega for a month, but at, you know, at the end of the day we don't listen anymore.
Mhm.
But you know, I have on my Spotify playlist, for example, I have a master Spotify playlist with 1,000 songs on it, right?
Hmm.
And on that playlist, I've got like almost all of Vivid, and so some of these songs come up, and I listen to them to this day on a regular basis, and I will rock out in the car with my daughters, and they will rock out with me. And it's great. It's really good music that if people do not know, I heartily recommend they go back and punch it up again.
I want to use the word flavor because I say there's from what you're describing, there's so much flavor on this album of different types of styles incorporated. They were funk metal pioneers.
Yeah.
So that's something that really turns me on to listening to them because I just absolutely love that sound.
And the best
So
part is that the flavor spelt with a U.
it that's how I pictured it in my mind as I said it.
You actually had it in your head with a U.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The 90s was a time of a lot of one-hit wonders where people didn't make it out. And when I first started the idea for this podcast, my idea was to kind of focus on the people who didn't make it out,
Yeah.
or at
And,
least not in a mainstream like top 40 level. They
right.
could still be relevant, still make music, but we just don't know what they're doing anymore. Now I've widened that. I've broadened my horizons. It's basically, I think if you put stuff out in the 90s, I'm going to talk about you on the show.
But the neat thing, I mean, the funny thing is, not many people did make it out, right? I mean, not
Hmm.
everybody's Madonna. Not everybody made it out of the 90s. Most people, like if you think
Yeah.
about the average lifespan of the typical artist, I mean, it's even shorter now, but at the time, like you're talking about, one album, possibly two, and it was very rare that somebody can pull out three. And I mean, here we're talking about a
Mm.
band that I love, who I still listen to this day in 2021, that had one album which did very, very well, and that
Hmm.
I'm sure they're all collecting lots of resids from, but did not make it out. Their next album was critically hugely successful. It's called Time's Up, Time's Out. I can't remember. See,
Hmm.
look at that. I can't even remember the name of the damn album. I had it. I listened to it. It's a great album,
Time's
but
up, 1990.
there we go. Time's Up. Not like four people bought it, right? Because everyone was like, oh, this is put on Vivid, or people moved on to do, and this is from a band that made really good music, right?
Hmm.
So it's tricky. It was a hard thing to pull off.
Yeah, they managed. Well, they put out two albums in the 90s. So Time's Up in 1990, and then the third album was called Stain in 93,
Yeah,
also well received by the critics. Now, when you look at the time, it's 1993. How do you think the grunge era affected Living Color?
that's an interesting question, actually. I've heard Stain, and I haven't heard it for a while, but I can't imagine Living Color being. You know what? I guess the answer to that question depends on how influential their label was, because they were a pretty solid, and they had their heads screwed on right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if the grunge movement, and if that sort of mid 90s feel did influence their music, I have a feeling that it was kind of like at the behest of their label.
Mm.
You know what? I'll have to listen to Stain again and see how well that thing holds up, because I haven't heard that since 1923. It's been a while.
That's something that the listeners can weigh in on as well, what their feelings and thoughts are on that if they want. Um, what was the best deep cuts for you on Vivid and why?
Ooh, that's an interesting
We're
question.
going to play some clips.
Are we? Are we?
Yeah, I play clips. I got a SOCAN license, so I can play
Oh,
clips.
I love it. Okay, so if you're gonna play a clip, ooh, that's a really good question. I would say do it from either Middleman or Desperate People.
Okay.
I would say that, because Cult of Personality, everybody knows, and I'm one of those really annoying people where whatever the hit of the album is, I'll be like, that's fine, but I get so tired of it because it gets played over and over and over again. You know what
Me
I mean?
too.
Yeah. Are you
I'm a
like that too?
big fan of deep cuts because I don't want to hear the top 40 on the radio all the
Right.
time. If I love a band, I usually really try to dig in deep. And I never want to hear Living on a Prayer again. And Bon Jovi's my favorite band. It's a
Well, I
great
mean, that's
song, but I'm so tired of it.
you know what? If Bon Jovi's your favorite band,
Mhm.
yeah, you might like the sound of a song like Desperate People, because they there is a bit of a similar vibe in terms of the band.
Mhm.
Like it's a bit harder. It's not as sort of top 40, but it's a little bit harder, but at the same time it's still super accessible, right?
Yeah.
But Cult of Personality, don't get me wrong, when that song was out, I rocked out to that thing left, right, and center when it was on the radio. But now it'll happen very frequently. Fortunately for me, it's the very first track on the album that I'll skip it. I'll just move on to the next one because I've heard Cult of Personality 2,641 times. So I'll
Yes.
move right on to I Want to Know and then to Middleman and Desperate People. I would say if you're going to play a clip, play a bit of Middleman or play a bit of Desperate People because they're fantastic and they show off Corey's voice really well.
That's the plan then. Good. What about like I said, you have to listen to Stain again, but does anything come to mind from Time's Up that we should check out?
Oh, hold on. Let me pull it up again.
We can edit here.
Okay, good. Hold
Take your
on.
time to look.
It's funny because Time's Up. There it is. Color. Oh yeah, I forgot this album. This was such a interesting album. I remember I was desperately in love with a girl when this album came out, and I remember being at a party desperately hoping that I could get together with her and wanting to put this album on as a way to seduce her. Guess how well that went. Uh, I think
What was the
History Lesson.
outcome?
No. History Lesson was no. Oh no, Pride. Pride was a really good song.
Okay.
Yeah, Pride was a really solid song. I remember that song really well. It was good. Um, yeah, Times Up was a bit of a different album because it had all kinds of it had these like little interstitials in between the songs, like little vocal bits that happened, and they did that a lot, right? I mean, one of the things that made Cult of Personality so big was it had those speeches at the top at the end. It had Kennedy and Martin Luther King with these clips, and I would probably be remiss in mentioning that Cult of Personality is this song about how dangerous a charismatic leader is. Uh,
Mm.
I it's not like that's still valid today in
No,
any. there's I
not at
can't
all.
think of anybody who that still applies to today. So thank goodness that song has been, taken into the ash bin of history.
Speaking of timeless and aging well, right?
And we record this, of course, on the day that he was impeached for a second time.
I know. Making records.
Ooh, baby.
What a
Speaking
guy.
of making records.
Living Color, why did they split when they did in 95? Do you know much about the reasons why?
I'm not sure why they split it. It's I know that Corey, the lead singer, Corey Glover, had a number of other interests. He was actually an actor as well. He was, if you watch Platoon, the movie, the Oliver Stone film Platoon, he
Hmm.
was actually in that film.
Yes.
And so that was kind of neat. Um, but they disbanded, I think it was in 95 because I think they just it was one of the typical things that they all had different musical goals that they wanted to do, and you know Vernon, who's the guitarist and sort of the main founder, I'm going to guess wanted them to sort of continue on with a more of a hard rock and feel. My gut tells me that Corey wanted to go in different directions just because he had this sort of jazzy background.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. They've never well, and they came back together, and it doesn't sound like it was a really acrimonious breakup, right? So
No,
obviously things went okay. It was just like, yeah, you know what, I want to do my own thing. Let's okay, thanks. Text me next week, and maybe we'll do something, kind of a thing.
that does seem to be the case. It doesn't
Yeah,
sound like there was any like bad blood between anybody.
no, not
Um,
at all.
I think, yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the movie Platoon as well. I wonder if he did any more acting as well.
I think he tried to, but then of course, Living Color made it so big that he
Yeah.
didn't really have the time to do it. I mean, it's interesting. It would be interesting to see if I pulled him up on IMDb. I wonder if he did anything after. Hold on. Actor Platoon. There it is. Known for Platoon. Oh no, wait a minute. Known for actor. He was also in. Okay, yeah, he was in a TV series called Signs of Life. He was in one or two things here and
Yeah.
there. So, but he certainly didn't burn up the the movies, and he didn't burn up the acting field. That's for sure.
Oh, it was good that he gave it a go and got to do some cool projects.
Yeah,
Um,
you would think that his father, Danny Glover, would have helped him get into the business.
geez, that's what it was. It was the nepotism. It
Yeah,
didn't.
that's
um, then we were mentioning about them playing with the Stones. There was an instance where I think it was for 4 nights they played with the Stones and Guns N' Roses.
that's right. The whole racist thing.
You saw all about that.
Oh yeah. Tell the story. It's because
Okay,
it's an interesting one.
so essentially, uh, Guns N' Roses have a song off of if is it GNR Lies? I think that's the
Uh,
album.
maybe. I was never a big GNR guy, to be totally honest with you. I was a
Okay.
Living Color guy.
Yes, this was in 1989. They gave a live, Living Color gave a live radio interview, and someone asked them about not their own music, but about Guns N' Roses' song called "One in a Million," which is, in my opinion, horrific.
Yeah.
I don't want to repeat the words that are used in it, but they're very derogatory towards Black people, gay people, and people who are not from this country
Wait,
or America.
insensitive material coming out of the rock genre in the early 90s? What?
You would never have known, right? Guns N' Roses are very squeaky clean back in the day. And so both Reed and Calhoun expressed that they were disappointed and disapproved of that song.
Yeah.
And that they felt that they should call them out for it. Um, but they also were incensed with the idea that they had to answer for what Axl Rose did. Why would
Right.
that be on them to
And
even
they
have
and
to address that?
yeah, and in a radio interview, they basically they called them out and they said, "Yeah, man, this is shitty stuff."
Vernon Reed says, "What's frustrating about that? At no time did anyone ever say, well, you know that Slash is black.'"
But you know what's weird? I actually didn't know that Slash was black. Did you know that?
Yeah. I don't know if he's mixed, but it doesn't matter. Like,
I
but
know,
still,
no, it
I'm
doesn't
pretty
matter at all.
sure, that he is. But yeah, it was never something that I thought about.
I never thought about it either. And then I saw that quote. Well, you know, the Slash is black, and I'm like, wait, Slash is black. I felt the same when I did. You know Malcolm Gladwell's black, and I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
I know, and it's just like, okay, well, but no, as he said, he's like, nobody turned to Slash and said, hey, how do you feel about One in a Million? Because you're black, but they're asking Living Color because they were touring on the same ticket, right?
Exactly. So, hence this radio interview happens. They go back to the tour, and Axel's pissed off and comes at them, basically saying, "You got a problem with me?" Kind of
Yeah.
bullshit. And I think after that, it was quite. He goes on stage, Axel, that night, and he was kind of saying to the crowd, "It's in the media that I'm some sort of racist, man. I ain't no damn racist."
And then
That
he went on to sing. He went on to sing the song.
yeah, yeah. So not to get too in depth because I don't want to use the language myself from the things he said. Um, but yeah, like that definitely uh I don't even know what to say about that. I don't even know how Guns N' Roses deal with that song anymore or what they've done about it or if they've even touched it. But the thing that interested me is the fact that they put Living Color under the spotlight to have to deal with something that isn't their problem.
Yeah. I frequently wonder about that. Like when you think about a band that has longevity and that has a song that is problematic like that. Like I wonder when the Stones stopped playing Brown Sugar. You know what I mean? Because if
Mm,
if you listen to Brown Sugar again, that's
yeah.
easily one of the most troublesome songs in the history of rock music.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure they played it on tour, but they had to reach a point where we're like, where you know, as the world became more woke. I mean, it's a good thing that they don't tour anymore because would people be asking them to play Brown Sugar? You know, I mean, I wonder about that. But yeah, I'm sure people
Mm.
retire songs because it's like, yeah, this we can't. That was a song of its time, and we can't do that anymore.
Honestly, the best thing they can do is retire it. The worst
Yeah,
thing that could happen is people cry and whine a little bit about it who like the song. Well, too bad. They played like 30 other songs you like, so
yeah.
fuck off.
Go home and listen to it on Spotify.
Exactly. If you're so it's so important to you. But yes, the
But
band, go ahead.
no, I was going to say the one of the other things that I loved was the fact that when they were kind of at their peak in '89, they performed on Saturday Night Live, and I was a big Saturday Night Live guy at the time. And one of the things that I always found was that the live music on Saturday Night Live always sounded kind of shitty. The mix was kind of off. It never sounded really good.
Hmm.
And I was just like, oh, okay. So even if it was a band that I liked, I was just like, okay, yeah, that was fine. I guess it was nice to see them, but the space didn't seem conducive to live music. Living Color burned that fucking place down. It was so good. It was
Yeah.
so good. They just nailed that gig. It was amazing.
I'll have to find it and see if I can find that on
I
the
wonder if
internet
it's on
somewhere.
YouTube. Because
Oh, I'm
I know
sure it
that
is.
NBC is really tight-fisted with their clips, and they sort of restrict them. But if you
Hmm.
can find that, damn, that
People
was a
find
good
a way.
gig.
all you have to, well, I shouldn't tell people how to find stuff. So I'm not going to be creative, and
Yeah.
you can find the things you need to find. There's ways to find Saturday Night Live episodes as well. So
Life
um,
finds a way.
yes, you can always purchase them. You can.
Yes, exactly. You can also always purchase them legally through the various means provided to you by the major conglomerates in the United States.
Exactly. Exactly. So the band gets back together in 2000.
Correct. They get
And
back together in 2000, and uh they have kind of stayed together. I mean, I guess sort of.
yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
most of what they've been doing now is kind of like, best of living color. I always find that interesting when you have
Mm,
like a best of album from a band that's really had one big album. It's like the best of Chumbawamba. Gee, I wonder what's going to be on that, aside
I
from Tub.
know. Or
Let's see, Tub Thumping, the live version.
someone puts out 2 albums and they get a greatest hits. I was like,
Yeah.
what the fuck for? I don't understand that.
Oh, that was the other thing that Corey Glover did in 2006. He toured with a Jesus Christ Superstar.
Mhm.
He played Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, which is actually, I wish I'd seen that because he would kill in that role. I know I do musical theater a bit myself. I sing a bit myself.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful.
in fact, I even auditioned to be in Jesus Christ Superstar, and I didn't get the role. But
No way.
I don't want to talk about that right
That's
now.
devastating.
Um, but that role is the role of Judas is usually played by a black man, and is a really rocking role. So I can see his voice suiting that perfectly. And he toured that for 2 years. He toured that from 2006 to 2008.
Well, there you go. Was that, I wonder if that was like a North American production. Like, did they
I
go
would
everywhere?
imagine it was. I'm guessing Ted Neely was probably Jesus. Ted Neely played Jesus from the time from DNA up until like this afternoon. He's the guy who played Jesus. Like basically, I saw a live production of Jesus Christ Superstar when he was touring. I guess it was about 10 years ago, and Ted Neely was playing Jesus again. And I was like, wait, isn't he like 93? And he's sung the role so much that you can just hear that he's sung the role he's fine, but
Hmm.
he's well past it. So sometimes they insert someone new like Corey Glover, and even though I didn't see it, I'll bet he kicked ass.
Well, I hope that he still considers doing some more acting in that in the future, you know?
Yeah, hey, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. And you know what? I mean, maybe I lied. Maybe I will go back and listen to that new, it's 3 years old, that new Living Color album again, just to see if I like it. One thing I do have to do is I want to go back and listen to Time's Up again, because I do remember liking that album quite a bit. But I never had the CD. I had it on cassette, and when I got rid of all my cassettes, it went the way of all flesh.
I still have a box of cassettes, but I don't know why. They're probably all dust now. Who knows?
Isn't that
That's
funny? Like I still have a whole bunch of VHS tapes, but I don't have a thing to play them on. They're just sitting there.
I have the box of VHS that I have to encode. I actually purchased something to digitalize them. It's just a matter of getting the making the time to do it
Okay,
because
no,
it's
but
tedious.
this is the big question to prove your props when it comes to being ridiculously old, which is that this might be the extra 10 years between you and I.
Hmm.
Did you have the seal test milk carton to put your LPs into? Like the
No.
33 LPs, like the albums, like before
Yeah.
CDs, you had you had your vinyl, and the sort of seal test milk cartons that they sort of carried milk in. They were the exact parameters to fit a whole bunch of 33 RPM records. So when you went over to somebody's house, or in my house, they would have, and everybody had like at least two or three of those milk cartons filled with
Mhm.
their vinyl. That's what they would have their vinyl is. As you and I sit here right now, I am pointing to underneath the stairs where I still, to this day, have a seal test milk carton filled with vinyl, which I can now listen to on my daughter's record player, which she will never let me use, but I'll try to get it to.
That is so cool. I like the convenience of carrying that around so you
Oh, it
can
was
bring
great,
them
and
over.
everyone had one. Everybody had one.
I'll have to tell you, I did not. I didn't have any vinyl to call my own really, because it was more like whatever my mom had
Right,
for
right,
vinyl.
right, right,
Because my first purchases that I made for myself were cassette.
right. Yeah. See, that's why I'm older than kerosene.
Yeah. But yeah, like yeah, it was cassette mostly, and then yeah, it took the first couple CDs I got. I think I got them from a radio station for free.
Oh, wow.
Uh, just promo ones, you know, with the hole punch in the corner, so you know
The
that
hole
they can't
punch in the
resell
corner.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think the first one was the David Bowie album Black Tie White Noise.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And but
I
I didn't have a CD player to play it on yet.
the hole punch in the corner thing is funny. I One of my most sort of humiliating memories is I remember I had Tim Curry from Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yes.
He came to the record store in my town, and so he was signing albums, and I had a Tim Curry album because Tim Curry actually released some solo albums,
Hmm.
as like just as a vocalist, and he had a song, he had an album called Simplicity, which I had, but the one that I bought was actually a delete I got from the delete bin, so it actually had the hole punch in it. So I still wanted to get him to sign it. So I took that and I took it up to him to sign it. And he actually said, "Oh, you didn't pay very much for this, did you?" And I was like, "Oh, shit. Tim Curry knows I'm a cheapskate."
Ah,
But he still signed it. I thought he was going to put, "Here, enjoy this, you cheap ass."
jeez. It's like I guess they notice these things.
Oh, yeah. 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 He knew. But I bought the album. I promised Tim I bought
Right
the
here on
album.
my wall. This one.
Ooh,
Wait,
Tiffany.
I can't. This was the first cassette I ever owned.
Oh, wow.
And she came and played Edmonton 3 years ago, maybe. And I got her to sign this, but now I realize, look at the hole punch.
Oh, it does have the whole, there it is, the hole punch.
But I didn't really care about that. This was gifted to me by a good friend who's a musician here in Edmonton.
I'm just
Um,
realizing that my signed Tim Curry album is probably sitting in that seal test milk carton that I just referred to. After we finish recording it, we're gonna have to go look. It might be actually worth something. Who the hell knows?
you should look. Now, on the tail end of things here in our discussion with Living Color, how political is this band? I know there's a lot of similarities there, and like you can tell, obviously, when we speak about Tom Morello, that Rage is quite influenced by them.
Yeah.
How
I,
how
I'm. I mean, I wouldn't say that they were political in the sense that that was their sort of raison d'être. It wasn't like they lived to be political. Like if
Mhm.
if you listen to so many of their songs, they deal with a bunch of other things. That being said, they were certainly not topics that they shied away from, and because of the fact that they were kind of pioneers as a black rock and roll band in the 80s who were tried to there were people trying to put them into a different peg. You
Mhm.
better believe that made it into their lyrics. There was social commentary, there was stuff on racism,
Mhm.
there was all kinds of stuff. There's what's the song, hold on, on yeah, on Open Letter to a Landlord, like the whole thing starts at, you can tear a building down, but you can't erase a memory. And that song is about gentrification in cities.
Mhm.
So, and this is on their first album. This is not like after they'd been established. They're just like, no, fuck this. We're going to be talking about this on this album. So it wasn't like they were in your face political, but at
Mhm.
the same time, they had no problem with their lyrics, straying into areas that they thought were important, so
I
I think
really
it's
like and respect that their subject matter is all over the map and doesn't shy away from anything.
yeah. And that's, you know what, that also might be one of the reasons why why the music endures too, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
know that I know VH1 did a thing called the 100 greatest artists of hard rock,
Mhm.
and Living Color was on there, I think at like number 70 or something. And I know that the Cult of Personality was used on Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. It was one of the songs that you could listen to in your car as you drove around and ran over people. um so their music endures, as you say. They call it funk metal. I'm not sure. I don't know how much I like that term. I do and I don't. It's not like I actively dislike the term,
Mhm.
but like funk metal implies that it's metal, which it's not,
Mhm.
and it implies that it's funk, which it's not. What it is it's really good rock and roll played by black guys who are insanely good musicians and who
Mhm.
have a background in soul and funk and jazz and rock and roll, and you can hear that in these little strings that make their way through the music, and
Mm.
that's just kind of a better way to look at it, I think.
They're just kind of more straight ahead rock and roll than either of the other
I think so.
titles. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think that honestly, if you listen to like it, like when you go off and you listen to those one or two songs that I said you should listen to, you're listening to straight up rock and roll, and it's great. It's like it's kick ass rock and roll is what it is.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned and clarified that. Otherwise, I would have been sitting here going, I love funk metal, you guys.
Well, hey, listen, what the hell do I know? It might be funk metal, and for all I know, maybe the band loves having it called funk metal because it's like, hey, we pioneered this brand new way of looking at things.
Yeah, it's
But at
possible.
the end of the day, when I listen to it, I'm listening to just really good rock and music, and I love the sound of it. Right?
I'm really happy to share the band with the listeners today, as well as play some clips. Um, I have reached out to the members of the band through different means. And hopefully, maybe one day they'll want to come and talk on the show, and that would be lovely.
Oh,
I
hey,
have
if
to
they
have you
do,
come. I'll get you
yeah,
back. I'll
you
get you
got to
back for
invite
that.
me back. Maybe after they listen to this, episode and they hear me just drooling all over them, they'll be like, oh, okay, well, I can talk to this Canadian schmuck.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll be awesome if they do that. But yeah, we'll reach out and we'll see what happens, right? Um,
Absolutely.
Now, to wrap things up, I really don't know what to say at this point. I'm really grateful for your time today. You're really interesting, and I really enjoyed the things you had to say about the band. So thank you so much, Don, for your time.
You are very welcome. It was a pleasure to be on the show. It's a fun show to listen to, and it's nice to talk about a lot of these artists that many people who are younger than you or I might not have listened to because as
Mm,
we said, so many of those artists get a bit of a short shrift because they had a short lifespan.
mhm.
But the music for many of these artists, very much including Living Color, is something that I would love my daughters to listen to more that I have no
Yeah.
problem recommending anybody listen to today. If you're listening to this right now, you're listening to this podcast and it's almost done and you're looking down at the counter seeing that there's only 3 minutes left in the show. Once the show is done, pull up your Spotify, pull up Vivid and listen to it and say, "Actually, that guy even though he was annoying was kind of right about this band."
You're so not annoying. Also, but yeah, I think one of the best parts of doing this show for me is figuring out that although people might not have be in the limelight after the 90s, a lot of them were still very actively involved in the music business and
Yeah,
still
very
making
much.
music to this day. It's just that they don't have the record contract anymore, or they're making it, but you have to go seek it out. So do
Not only
that's what
that,
I
but
try to
they're
encourage people to do.
yeah, and they're not only doing that, but they're making music in different ways, right? They're either like a session musician
Hmm.
or they are in music publishing, or they figured their way through in terms of making a living at it without making a video for MTV.
Precisely. And yeah, you can still find stuff that could really appeal to you by that artist if you go and seek it out. So there's a lot of material there to listen to still for Living Color. So I really recommend as well that people go check it out.
What's your favorite color, baby? That's actually, I think that's the last song. That's the last. I said that at the beginning with it. There's a song called "Living Color," and that's how it starts. So, what's your favorite color, baby? Living color.
That's a perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Don. Three
You are
Interesting
very
Things
welcome.
podcast. Yeah. So I'm going to play the trailer for you on this episode. I'm also going to play the trailer probably sporadically throughout other episodes too, because I have a bit of a collection going on now and of a trailer exchange with other podcasts. So I'm going to
Oh
include
my
you in
gosh,
that.
you're such a doll. You're such a doll. I
Isn't
love
it
it. Thank
nice
you.
to do that though? I
It's
like
so
it.
great, and I'll definitely be giving this a shout out on all my socials.
Yeah.
If you want socials, if you want to come follow us, and by the way, on Three Interesting Things, we're also looking for interesting things to be talking about, and they can fall literally anywhere in the realm of human experience. So if you have something that you want us to talk about, essentially the idea behind the show is that people, those things that you find on the internet that you want to talk about with somebody. It's like, hey, I saw this article today. I saw this thing today. It's either funny, it's thought provoking, it's whatever.
Yes.
That's what we want. And so tweet it to us at three interesting, the number three interesting, or on our Instagram at three, that's the number three interesting things, or email it to me at three interesting things at gmail.com. There's a little final promo just to be horribly commercial.
Well, we're still in this lockdown time because I imagine you're going through the lockdown right now, right? You're in Ontario.
Oh, listen, I'm out
I'm looking at your
licking.
sweater. That's why I think you're in Ontario.
I'm outside partying with people, licking the inside of people's mouths. It's a grand old time here in Toronto. Yes, I'm in Toronto, and we actually just yesterday got new lockdown restrictions put into place. No one quite knows what they are because they sound exactly like they were before. Essentially, I think the only difference is that I can't go to Loblaws after 9 p.m. I think that's the
Ooh,
only difference. I
you
know
guys,
it's
you guys got it worse than Alberta.
well, I know you
But
guys are
well,
having getting
Alberta
it
just
worse.
has a big fucking party through the whole damn thing.
Well, that's
Oh,
well.
what restrictions? We don't have those.
That's the
Stupid.
funny thing. I think Toronto's getting a bit of a bad rap because there's high numbers,
Yeah.
but from what I have experienced, and I've been around the town, people are generally being good. People are generally following the rules. The only difference is we've got so many fucking people
It's
here.
population related.
It's population, so that
Condensed
if
density.
yeah, if 1% of the population of Edmonton is being an asshole, or 1% of the population of Toronto is being an asshole, there's going to be a lot more assholes in Toronto out on the street,
Mm.
spreading the virus around, which is the main problem going on right now. So yeah, wash your hands, wear a mask, think of other people, don't be a dick.
When we're talking percentage wise, Alberta is like worse than all of the prairies and probably Toronto combined.
And yet we all have it way better than our friends south of the border. I was just talking about this on the
Yeah.
episode of the podcast of my podcast that's coming out next week. We were talking about the fact that over the last 3 days in the United States, more people have died in the United States than in 9/11 and both Gulf Wars combined. And it's not a top five news story in the United States. That's how much it's gone to shit in the States. So as much as and my wife is from the south of France, and in France things are pretty messed up there as well.
Mhm.
So we're doing poorly, but at the same time we could be doing worse.
I think I'm going to keep this in the podcast.
Yeah, hey, please do, please do.
Yes. Oh, okay. Well, yes. And then I'm going to make sure I tag you on all the social media and message you when this comes out. Um, also, please be on the show again. Like, if you
Hey,
got the time, it was an absolute blast. You're very knowledgeable. And yeah, I would love to have you back.
well, you have someone of a vintage who can speak relatively intelligently about a number of the bands that you want to talk about. So,
Mm.
if you want, what you can do is you can send me the list again of who you're like. If you want to pick a
Yeah.
top 10 of who you'd like to get over the next little while, if there's any that I cannot talk about, I will tell you. Like if you were doing a GNR, I'd say have fun. I'll listen to it because I there's no way in hell I could talk about it.
Fair enough.
But there's a number of artists that I could because I'm a big music guy anyway. So, well,
Are
I'm
you
glad.
genre specific, or are you kind of all over the
Nah,
map?
I'm all over the damn map. Yeah,
Okay.
all over the map. I'm one of those people who firmly believes that you should not be ashamed of anything on your Spotify playlist or your iPod.
I do not have guilty pleasures. I embrace everything I listen to. I don't
100%.
even care if other people think it's lame.
100%. One of my favorite things to listen to when I'm working at my computer is Hanson. I'll listen to fucking Hanson. I'm one
Mhm.
of two people who actually bought Hanson's second album, and let me tell you, it's one of the best albums that came out in the '90s.
Oh, which is the one with that song? I will come to you. Oh, I will come to you. And
Oh, I don't
then
know that song.
there's one that's
Hey, you know
this
what?
time around, I think
This
is
time
the
around, that's the second album.
such a good song.
Hey, guess what? I think we just found what I can come on the show and talk about next. If you want,
Let's talk about Hanson.
I can easily talk about Hanson. I love Hanson. They're
I
great.
have a friend who's on the show sometimes, Kendra.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard her on the show, but she's a huge Hanson fan too. So we could
Ah,
even like
see,
have her pitch in on that. It would be
you,
great
me,
to
and Kendra are going to be talking about Hanson, and I will fanboy all over Hanson.
All right.
So Hanson did they did do you know Tiny Desk concerts on NPR?
No.
There's a thing on NPR Music where they do this thing called Tiny Desk Concerts, and they have an artist, and they're big artists. They had Lizzo, they had Taylor Swift, they had a bunch of people, and they'll get them to play a little concert at the desk with all of the employees of NPR clapping and everything else. And Hanson came in, and they did a 3-song gig, and I must have watched that video on YouTube like 100 times. I'll be watching that video, and my daughter will come in the room and like, "Are you watching that stupid Hanson video?" I'm like, "It's so good. They are so adorbs."
they're, but they're actually talented musicians,
They're
which
very
people
talented musicians.
just
Yeah.
because like I don't know. I think it's cool to actually have male influence speaking about boy bands too, which I think is going to be really interesting to have.
Oh,
There's a
100%.
there's a boy band podcast called New Pod on the Block, and it's hosted by two guys.
Oh, that's great.
And there's no mocking. Like they're absolutely serious about it. And they're like, yeah, we respect this. And I'm
I
like,
listen.
good.
I think there is so much respect needs to be given to pop, and boy bands are a big part of pop.
Hmm.
Oops, that's my phone. I'm sure my wife will get it. Actually, hold on one second. I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
no
get it.
problem. Here, I'm gonna hit stop on this anyway.